Welcome to Lecture 3, Part 1. So this lecture will be looking at stochastic effects and cancer inductions. So last week we did deterministic effects. So these were, if you recall, these were a biological response where the severity varies with radiation dose, so it's predictable. With deterministic effects, there's also like a threshold dose, so they won't really kick in until you reach a certain amount of dose. And typically, early effects tend to be deterministic. With stochastic effects, this is where the probability or the frequency of the biological response to radiation is a function of dose. So it's a probability rather than a definite thing. So, the chance of getting a disease or the disease incidence increases proportionally with dose. So in this case, for stochastic effects, there's no known safe levels of radiation exposure. So they don't have a threshold. Stochastic, the terminology just means that stochastic means statistics, so probability. So, for example, like tossing a coin. If there's a dose increase, then there's an increased probability that the effect will occur, but the effect itself will not be more severe. Alright, so it's just the chance of getting a particular disease, not the severity of the disease. So stochastic effects are those which are random in nature and show up as things such as cell mutations rather than cell deaths. So the mutations are when, if you recall from the first lecture, where a cell is damaged by radiation, but it remains viable and then goes on to reproduce other damaged cells or mutated cells. Normally these will be eliminated by the body's defence naturally, but it's in rare cases it doesn't occur, and then that's where the stochastic effect turns up. So this could be like cancer, or it could be a mutation in a gene that gets pushed onto later generations. The dose, they're applicable at all dose levels, and the number of affected cells, the more the affected cells there are, the greater the chance of at least one of the damaged cells surviving and reproducing. Some people differ in their sensitivity, so various states of health, various genetic backgrounds, that sort of stuff. So people do vary in their sensitivity. And what you'll see in the second part of this lecture is that the statistics, or the numbers that make up the stochastic effect statistics, are very, very rubbery and very large uncertainties. Now, if you think about it, the overall probability of cancer occurring from a single mutation is very small. So if you look at this, so for example, if you look at background radiation, due to the background radiation, within a human, there's over 10 to the 12 ion pairs created every year in your total DNA mass. So this is just through background radiation and whatever other toxins that you might have. But only 25% of deaths are due to cancer, and very few of these cancer deaths are considered to be caused by radiation. So 10 to the 12, that is a huge amount. So obviously if every one of these ion pairs created caused cancer, we wouldn't be around for very long at all. So the actual chances of a radiation-induced cancer are very small. One important thing to note is that radiation-induced cancers can't be distinguished from any other type of cancer. So you can't look at someone, examine someone with cancer and say this was caused by radiation. You can guess that it might be if the person's received a large dose, but you cannot say for sure. If we compare stochastic effects to deterministic effects, the one analogy is the hazards of driving a car. So the number of hours behind the wheel is a stochastic parameter. So the more that you drive, the more that you're likely to be involved in an accident. So that's a probability just because you're on the road more. But the severity of accident is independent of the number of hours driven. So you don't know how bad the accident's going to be. What about getting a speeding ticket? So a speeding ticket can be a deterministic effect because there's a threshold, which is a speed limit. Below this, you shouldn't get a speeding ticket. But above the threshold, the severity of the penalty increases with the speed. So the statistics of radiation-induced cancer are based on epidemiological studies. How they know it happens is they look at large populations of people who have received certain doses, and then they have an increased chance of getting cancer. So one is the lifespan study. So this is the study of survivors of the Japanese atomic bomb. And also the Fukushima disaster is getting rolled into this as well. But mainly it's based on Japanese atomic bomb survivors. And we'll cover this later in the semester. Another group that are looked at are radiotherapy patients. So these guys are medically exposed, so they receive large radiation doses. So you can look at the chances of getting secondary cancer. And then there's occupationally exposed people who might receive greater than normal doses. So this could be, for example, uranium miners, people painting radium dials on watches and clocks. So we'll cover this again later in the semester. So these were radium-based paints, which were used back in the 1920s. Right, so what defines cancer? So the stochastic effects is a study of the probability of a particular dose will result in effect. So let's have a look at what actual cancer is. So cancer is characterised by 6 hallmarks. Cancer is actually not a single disease. It's actually many diseases just named under the umbrella cancer, but it is in fact actually many diseases. But there's 6 hallmarks. The first is evading apoptosis. So remember last week we did apoptosis. So this is like a programmed cell death. So that so if the cell is damaged, it should basically program itself to die rather than continue on. So it's a process that helps balance cell proliferation and cell death. So its tumour growth depends on the growth rate and the cell loss. So the avoidance of cell death due to apoptosis is a mechanism which enhances the tumour growth. So there's cancerous cells do have a lack of apoptosis. So the way that apoptosis works is cell membranes rupture, the cellular skeleton breaks down, and the nucleus with the DNA is fragmented, so then the cell basically dies. It can be triggered within 2 hours, and then the cells are just digested. And then the most common way that they can acquire resistance to this is by mutation in the p53 gene. The second hallmark is there's a cell sufficiency in growth stimulation. So most cells require a stimulus to grow. It's a growth factor. So the stimulus is typically received by a receptor protein in the membrane, And then growth factor receptors are good targets for cancer drugs. So if you can knock these out, then that will stop the cancer growing. Tumour cells express more growth factor receptors, so are more sensitive to growth and more likely to self-stimulate growth. Conversely, there's another hallmark is the insensitivity to growth inhibition. So it goes along with the self-sufficiency. So anti-growth signals are blocked. There's a limitless proliferation. This is the fourth hallmark, or cell immortality. In most cells, normal cells, infinite proliferation is not normally possible. So they can only divide a certain amount of times. So in each cell division, the ends of the DNA in linear chromosomes, or these telomeres, get a little bit shorter. So you lose a little bit at the end of the cell, end of the DNA molecule with each division. So this process limits the total number of cell divisions to 60 or 70, depending on the cell. And so what happens is when this number is reached, the ends of the DNA can't hold the DNA together any further, and so cells can't reproduce. But tumour cells have acquired a mechanism to maintain the telomere length, and so these cells can continue to divide for as long as they want to. There's the fifth hallmark is sustained angiogenesis, and that's required to provide nutrient and oxygen growth. So this is providing its own food supply. So, for example, growing blood vessels within the tumour. So once the tumour gets to about 0.1 mil in diameter, it requires, it can't just rely on external blood vessels, so it needs to start providing its own blood supply. Tumour cells express angiogenic factors like these growth factors, and so they can develop their own blood supply. And this is essential for the growth of the tumour. So this is like a good target for new therapies. And then the final hallmark is tissue invasion and metastases. So this is tissue invasion is where the cancer starts to spread to other tissues, and about 90% of all cancer deaths are actually due to metastases. So this is where the tumour spreads from the original site to a new site and starts growing new cancerous cells. So radiation protection considerations for this, all these are associated with changes to the DNA, and it's evident that there's several events required to cause a mutation of a cell into a cancer. So it's not a single event process and consists of many steps. These can include initiation, promotion and progression, and radiation is thought to be important for the progression stage. So in mathematical models of cancer induction, it will make a huge difference which process the radiation is responsible for. And then so identifying genetic traits of cancer induction may allow for other diseases which are accompanied by increased susceptibility to cancer induction. So that's all for this, and then in the next video we'll look at the actual numbers.